Hold on to your butts because the dinosaurs are loose. Nearly 30 years after Steven Spielberg's blockbuster movie, we're still getting sequels. To help celebrate this week's release of Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, we're gonna go on an adventure through all of the 8 and 16-bit games based on the 1990 movie. Turn away now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're gonna spoil the story and ending for a whole bunch of Jurassic Park games. This is Game Over, the early years. By now, we all know the story of Jurassic Park. An old guy brings dinosaurs back to life, archaeologists come to evaluate the situation, the dinosaurs escape, death, destruction, and everybody tries to escape the island. This is pretty much what happens in most of the video games, though there are some variations between them. This one is a side-scroller, this one is overhead, this one lets you play as a raptor, and this one is basically a full-motion point-and-click adventure. Instead of going through excruciating detail about every game, I'm just gonna rush through a bunch of these Jurassic Park adaptations and we'll talk about the endings. Let's start with the version found on the Nintendo Entertainment System and Game Boy, which are both essentially the same. We play Dr. Grant as he tries to rescue the stranded kids and escape the island. This ends up being more of a shoot-'em-up than the movie was, leading to an epic one-on-one fight against the T-Rex. It leads to what I think we'll all agree is a pretty boring ending. Here's what happens next. Now, the NES wasn't the only system to get a Jurassic Park game, as Sega delivered their own version for both the Game Gear and Master System. It's a pretty straightforward side-scroller, featuring some genuinely good-looking outdoor stages and some harrowing boss battles. The game also features a bunch of these driving stages, which is really the one thing that separates this game from all the other versions of Jurassic Park. You'll eventually find yourself in a one-on-one battle against the T-Rex in a bunch of boxes. Here's what happens next. Not to be outdone by the NES and Game Boy, Ocean also decided to create a 16-bit version of Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo. This is an overhead adventure game where you're trying to turn on the park's power system, reboot the computer, and save the people stranded on the island. It also has a bunch of these first-person stages that, while archaic in design, are surprisingly terrifying. It all ends with Dr. Grant escaping Jurassic Park and getting to the helipad. Here's what happens next. Now here's where things start to get complicated. When Blue Sky Studios went to make Jurassic Park on the Genesis, they decided to add something extra by letting you play as either Dr. Grant or a velociraptor. That's right, you can literally play through the game as a dinosaur. This obviously changes up the story quite a bit, so let's start with Dr. Grant. We see him fight through one of the more intense versions of Jurassic Park before meeting up with a pack of angry raptors. Here's what happens next. Now, as a raptor, it's your job to harass Dr. Grant, keeping him from completing his quest and leaving the island. It ends at the same spot as the other mode, only this time around you're the raptor and you're trying to outsmart Dr. Grant. Here's what happens next. So 1 year later, Sega decided to get back in the dinosaur business with Jurassic Park Rampage Edition. This is a faster, longer, and more challenging version of the original game, complete with a new story and better endings. It actually takes place after the events of the first game, with Dr. Grant safe and sound away from the island. But as the Costa Rican army starts blowing up Jurassic Park, Grant notices that InGen field agents may be trying to gather up eggs and DNA. He sets out to stop them, only to have his helicopter crash land on the island. He is once again forced to find his way out of Jurassic Park. It all ends with an incredibly dramatic and beautiful boat race against a T-Rex. Here's what happens next. Now, much like the original version, this Rampage Edition also lets you play through the game as the Raptor. The good news is that this character is given a mostly original adventure that doesn't feel nearly as tied to the Grant storyline. Unfortunately, the ending isn't very memorable. Here's what happens next. Similar to the Rampage Edition on the Genesis, the Sega CD version of Jurassic Park acts as something of an unofficial sequel to the movie. It's a weird combination of point-and-click adventure gaming and fake light gun sections. You play an InGen agent who's been sent to Jurassic Park to gather up a bunch of eggs and take them off the island. Unfortunately, this plan backfires when your helicopter crashes and kills pretty much everybody. But what our hero didn't realize is that this time the helicopter was sabotaged by a different company. Actually, this cinema pretty much sums up everything you need to know.
More bad news. We've got positive ID on that aircraft. It's a helicopter registered to Biosyn Corporation. Those are the guys who hired Nedry to steal the dinosaur DNA from the island. And it looks like they're trying again. We're getting some interference.
Hello, nice of you to join me. I represent... Well, I guess it doesn't matter who I represent now, does it? Our people will arrive on the island in 3 hours. And we're after the same thing you are, so just stay in the visitor center. Should only take us about 30 minutes to complete our work. We don't want to hurt you, but if you get between us and those dinosaur eggs, well, I couldn't guarantee your safety. Just leave the eggs alone and stay out of our way.
So the plan is to gather up a bunch of eggs, avoid the military guys, and get off this island in one piece. This leads to a slow-paced walk through the jungles in hopes of stealing the enemy's helicopter and leaving them stranded on the island. Of course, this means that there's going to be one last shootout. Here's what happens next.
I knew you could do it. If anyone could get those eggs away from Biosyn, you were the one. Congratulations. I'll see you when you get back. And thanks.
The sad truth is, none of these endings are very good. They range from simple text crawls to mediocre full-motion video. These endings feel like an afterthought most of the time, and even the best examples aren't that thrilling. That said, I like that we're able to walk around the credits in the NES version of the game. Also, I think we can all agree that the Super NES ending confirms that there's no volcanoes on the island. It's clearly flat and green, so this new movie sure as hell better have a good explanation. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. So here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Jurassic Park game? We've covered a lot of ground here, and not all of these games are much fun. I like what Sega was doing with their Jurassic Park games, but the gameplay wasn't always great. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we'll be introducing a brand new episode of Electronic Gaming Monthly's Best and Worst later this week, along with more reviews and maybe even that one show where I look at old websites. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, I recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.